The 2024 horror film Immaculate, starring Sydney Sweeney as Sister Cecilia, presents a chilling exploration of faith, control, and personal autonomy. Set in a secluded Italian convent, the story reveals a sinister undercurrent as Cecilia, a devout nun, becomes entangled in a horrifying conspiracy. But in one of the most horrific scenes, the order turn to the burning and branding the soles of Sister Cecilia's feet with a molten cross, in a form of ritualistic punishment and assertion of control. This act symbolises her submission to the authority of the convent and the religious order. Now, let's face it, unless your surname is Tarantino, chances are you're more anxious and agitated than aroused by this particular sequence. But if we look beyond the surface, we can see that in the film, this punishment aligns with the wider themes of bodily control and oppression, as Cecilia's autonomy is stripped away in both literal and symbolic ways. The branding also reflects the broader narrative of Cecilia being coerced into the role of a chosen vessel for the cult-like experiments within the convent. It ties into the historical and symbolic use of physical suffering as a means of supposed spiritual purification or penance, often seen in extreme religious practices. In this case, however, it is warped into a tool of domination rather than faith. The act of branding and burning the soles of Cecilia's feet in Immaculate serves as a vivid representation of control, submission, and the ritualistic fanaticism within the convent's oppressive hierarchy. So here's a deeper look at the significance of the scene. The branding acts as a physical marker of Cecilia's subjugation to the convent's authority. By branding her feet, critical for mobility and independence, the nuns are symbolically rooting her to their order and denying her freedom to leave both physically and spiritually. This punishment reflects warped interpretations of traditional penance and purification often seen in extreme religious practices. The act is reminiscent of historical practices where pain and suffering were believed to bring individuals closer to God. In the context of Immaculate, this suffering is manipulated to serve the convent's dark agenda rather than genuine spirituality. The convent, under the control of Father Tedeschi and Mother Superior, exerts dominance through rituals designed to break Cecilia's autonomy. The branding is part of a pattern of abusive behaviours meant to make her compliant, particularly as a chosen vessel for their genetic experiment involving the supposed creation of a messianic figure. By inflicting pain and permanently marking her body, the convent strips Cecilia of her individuality and identity. She becomes an instrument for their goals, emphasising the film's critique of institutionalised control over women's bodies. The burning of her feet is not only a physical punishment, but also a psychological attack. It reinforces the inescapable nature of her predicament, further isolating Cecilia and forcing her deeper into submission. This then contributes to her internal struggle between faith and the horrifying reality that she faces. This act serves as a turning point in the film, highlighting Cecilia's increasing entrapment and the sinister extent of the convent's practices. It symbolises the broader theme of bodily autonomy, echoing the movie's critical stance on coercive control, particularly within institutions that exploit faith and power. And worse, it was also based on real-world instances. Burning and branding were indeed used as forms of punishment and torture during medieval times throughout the world, often as public displays of power, deterrence, or to mark individuals as criminals or heretics. Here's a brief overview of their historical usage. The purpose for branding was frequently used to mark individuals as slaves, criminals, or outcasts. A hot iron would be used to burn a symbol or letter into the skin, permanently identifying the individual as having committed a specific crime or as belonging to a lower social class. In Europe, for example, criminals could be branded with letters like T for thief or H for heretic. Blasphemers or social offenders suffered a similar act, such as Joan of Arc, who was reportedly branded on her shoulder. In some cases, branding was used on the hands or forehead, making the punishment visible to the public. Burning was a widespread method of torture, often used to extract confessions or punish those accused of heresy or witchcraft. Burning the soles of the feet specifically was a known practice, as it inflicted excruciating pain on a very sensitive part of the body which is covered in the thinnest skin, whilst also keeping the victim alive. This method was mostly used during interrogations to force confessions. In extreme cases such as accusations of witchcraft or heresy, individuals were burned alive at the stake to deter others. Medieval institutions often framed these practices as a form of penance or purification, believing that enduring physical pain could in fact cleanse the soul of sin. This justification mirrors the branding and burning in Immaculate, where the convent twists faith as a means of control. Ultimately, these practices were designed to reinforce the authority of the church or state by instilling fear. Branding or burning served as both a physical punishment and a psychological mark of shame. While such practices are no longer in standard use, their symbolic echoes appear throughout media like Immaculate to emphasise the extremes of institutional power and the dehumanization of individuals under authoritarian regimes. And further, the film's use of this historical method underscores its critique of oppressive control. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and perhaps even learned something from the video. And if so, please share and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And of course, thank you for watching, if indeed you still are.